All right, it's the SE Ultimecia, not TTAC, SE Ultimecia Finals, Tezuka versus Seto. Let's talk about the rule set briefly. Let's scroll down so we can see all the cards as well. The rule set is level 3, 5, 7, 8, 9. Must use one card from each level. All normal rules in effect. I've recently had some errors around forgetting rules. We won't have that problem here. Must use one card from each level. No double or triple numbered cards. No rares or semis. So, no double or triple numbered cards says you can't inherently cover A's with plus wall. So, my first instinct, I haven't looked at the hands yet, is use an A. Tezuka did, Seto did not. So, instinctively, I'm thinking that's a number that can't be beat, right? I think Seto has done a very Seto thing. He has gone with dynamic cards at all points, right? Now, with no double numbers allowed, dynamic cards are going to be more likely, right? The big corners on most levels tend to be double cards. If we look at what the levels are, 9, 8, 7, 5, 3, you know, okay, it's A9s on level 9. He goes for a 9, 8. On level 8, it's 9, 9s. On level 7, it's 8, 8s. On level 5, it's 7, 7s. On level 3, I guess 6, 6s. So clearly not available here. But nonetheless, we can still see some differences. Tezuka uses the 4176, which is kind of in generic sense the most overpowered level 3 card. This is a strong level 4 card. Most people prefer 7632s to 7641s, but I think also most people would agree the difference is pretty marginal. And so you have what is basically a top tier level 4 card at level 3. Well, Seto has gone for 1257, which has some combo play, and as we can see here, gives him a weak corner that the rest of his hand can entirely double capture. Is any of that covered? I notice Seto has 2 8s to the right, but it doesn't look like Tezuka can cover that on the bottom row. Interesting. Okay. Is there any other redundancies? Hmm. Not really seeing them. I noticed 4176 controls two of Seto's cards that could go in four, but with a 1 and a 4 up as well, it doesn't seem like there's going to be combo play there. Um, Also, looking at Tezuka's hand, I wonder if he's intending to drop 5, 4, 7, 6, and 3, given that he has these two very redundant cards for 3, and that 4176 is actually the better recapture. Seto only has the one capture there, but there is no combo play from under it. But back to hands for a moment. So Tezuka has gone with power in 4176, and Seto has gone for um, 1257. They have the same level 5 in just what the numbers are, and the same level 7, and the same level 8, and then another difference at level 9, where again, Seto goes for a more balanced card, and Tezuka goes for more raw power. I think I prefer Tezuka's choices here in general. I'm not actually seeing a move I like for him though. And this is something I think Seto is extremely good at. Is, this is very early in the game, right? This was a weak corner, but things not quite lining up right for the opponent. Now, Tezuka doesn't have to like commit to anything here, right? Let's just make sure everything's recording properly. Yeah. All right. And I'll start putting into the database as well because this is the finals. It's a bit early for me, so I am not entirely here yet, but maybe we'll get there. What's the time control? Looks like it's 7 minutes. Um, Tezuka is much more of a time user than Seto. He's not, deli in time use, but he certainly uses his time, where Seto tends to play very quickly. So there is something Akiyama mentioned about 3 minutes, because Seto and Akiyama are clearly the two fastest open players around, right? Just by large margins. Um, so I don't know if this applies to Seto as well, but Akiyama said leading up to the semifinals of Triad Wars 15, I had thought when we got 3 minutes for our match that that was clearly going to favor him. But he said he really didn't like 3 minutes. And the reasoning was sort of most of my moves I'm going to make within 2 minutes. But the moves I don't, I want more time than 3 minutes to figure out. The positions I'm in trouble, I'm going to use more time than that. Most of the time, I don't have to use that much. But the times I do, that kind of extra time between 2 and 3 minutes is of no help, right? The jump to 5 or 7 means in those positions I really need time, I can take it, but most of the time I will play quickly and kind of put pressure on that way. So 7864 lines up pretty poorly in this game. That's what I keep coming back to looking at these hands. Is 7864 ever landing and 4 or 8 is comboed, and it's kind of the card you'd love to be able to put there because it's the card that might have potentially nice numbers facing out. It's been a while since I've played one of these split level sets. My instinct here, and it's not very strong because it doesn't like directionalize the game very well, is maybe 4176 and 1. It doesn't quite threaten anything in 2. I might have to workshop this because I'd like to be able to play 2 and because Seto's only card for 4 is 9864 that captures. And if you had so you almost threaten going in 2 if you could set up against that move in 4, and you only have to set up against one move. It looks like you cannot set up against it, but I think it creates some kind of challenge in the position, and if Seto does block 4, whether with 9864 or with other cards like 4876, um, you then have room to set up kind of whatever L you want, right? There's a lot of freedom among Ls. The position's going to be clunky, though. This is not a position where cards are going to be taken cleanly. And I think that tends to be good for people who have a really good feel for combos at the end. And Seto tends to have that. And like it's really easy to imagine a situation where 7864 is swept by 4876, where kind of the top left is left open, and if Tezuka goes in the middle row, 4876 covers it, and if Tezuka goes kind of on the left of the top or any left or center, 4876 covers that 8 as well, right? Or 1789 potentially has good coverage. But I do like 8259. Something I'm not going to be able to argue for here because I'm not calculating is yeah, there's some case of you can just like take one thing was you can take blocking 8 because 9 is such a good square for you, right? Because 9 is such free safety for you in a way that is just never going to be contested. But there's also, I was thinking maybe you could even do it, and I think this is way too high risk, but if you check it, sometimes you can play a card in 8 that gets comboed, say by 1789, but just because at that point, like, I think there's, lots of lines here, but say you go, I guess Seto always has multiple options, but say you could go like 1987 and 8, and that 7546 couldn't combo that, but 1789 could. And say they go 1789 and 9. Yes, they flipped everything, but also you have 3 different things to attack, and you should have some decent L there. Um, so you can sometimes see spots where like the game is confusing, and by walking into a combo, you clarify it. I actually I think the time I did that most successfully in the return was actually against Tezuka. Now we should notice 9864 and 9 is safe for Seto. So the natural move is usually 4, but 9 is not impossible. Let's quickly look at moves in 4. 7546 does not get comboed from 1. It can be comboed from 5, but you probably don't want to. One nice thing about 7546 and 4 is it sets up 4876 to have both 1 and 5, which seems very promising for Seto. One thing to note is 4876 and 5 is vulnerable to 6. There's a combo in 6. Something to keep an eye out for. Okay. What else could go naturally in 4? 4, 8, 7, 6, and 4 is not unreasonable. 9, 8, 6, 4 does not seem like the answer. Comboed in 1, no combo back. Perfectly possible you're doing okay there, but it's not. It's never going to be favorable. Um, Technically, there's options in 6, but I think when the card in 7 is so weak to 4, setups in 6 don't mean very much, right? Like, you play 6, they get a free square in 9, you go 5, yay, you got your combo, but 9 is still safe to you, and the opponent maybe can play in 3, locking in 6, maybe can play in 4, locking in 7. There's a lot of options for them there. When the number facing out is weak, I think you don't mess with 6. The solver sometimes says in these positions, yeah, 6 is a tie, but almost inevitably when it does, there are other moves that are ties, and 6 is kind of the weirdest, most uncomfortable way to tie. And there's like never positions like this where the solver says only 6 ties. But I think it like logically makes sense. 6 should not be dangerous here. So I think you're choosing between 4 and 9, 4, 6, and 9 being the main squares in these positions. Um, Occasionally you can go 5 if you just have really good combo control of everywhere, but you don't here. Um, I think the next most common square is actually 3, both because sometimes there's safety there, right? Sometimes the card you drew out of the opponent's hand gives safety, but also sometimes because you just don't want to interact with the board, but they can't either, right? You don't have a card for 4, but they don't have a card for 4. You maybe don't have a great card for 9, but they maybe don't have a great card for 9. Here, again, I don't think that's the case. So I think we'll be seeing a move in 4 or 9, which are the most conventional squares. And which one do you want? He's picked up 9864, so I think it's 9, and I was leaning that way as well. I really like the safety here. You have a tied score, you each have one card on board vulnerable to attack, and it's not obvious Tezuka has cards he wants to put in 4 that are comfortable there. And as the board fills up and 7864 stays in Tezuka's hand, I get more and more worried that 4876 is going to sweep at some point. I also note there is no setup in 5 against 9864, right? Because one thing you sometimes can do in these positions is go in 5, create a threat in 6, they have to block 6, that gives you time to block 4, and you've grabbed the card in 8, right? You've grabbed 2 of the 3 cards in the bottom row. Now it seems like you don't have that option, and you have to find a move in 4. So what card would you put in 4? 5476 seems the natural choice. One unpleasant thing is that 1987 is hard to land in 5 as the recapture because 7546 is the plus wall in 6. Those 5 and 6 are playing well. But my guess is you play 5476 and 4. Is there a big setup against it? There might be. But I don't see it. I don't think 2 is that scary. I think if they go in 1, you can probably play A2, 5, 9, and 5. Maybe you can't. Maybe 4, 8, 7, 6, and 1. Because that covers A2, 5, 9, and 5, right? There's now a plus of 7, 5, 4, 6, and 2. It covers 1, 9, 8, 7, and 5. There's a plus wall with 7, 5, 4, 6, and 6. And 7, 8, 6, 4 only has the single capture and is also plussed. So you don't actually have a card to land in 5 there. That's dangerous. So this is dangerous. Seven, eight, 6, 4, and 4, you walk into a combo. A2, 5, 9 might work, but it's really scary because the opponent goes 5 and they have so many extra cards. And 1, 9, 8, 7, again, you don't have to recapture from 5, and they can kind of set up the same way. 4, 8, 7, 6 controls a lot of space. So I'm now wondering a little more about 5. I think this is a very dangerous position for Tezuka. I think, as is often the case, Seto plays a weak corner and suddenly your position collapses. Um, so 5, 4, 7, 6, and 5 is currently the move I'm thinking about. I don't think you get set up on too severely. There's options in 3, but I don't think it's that worrisome. Um, and I think the natural move for Seto is to put something in 4. But one nice thing is you can potentially play 1 with 1987 against anything in 4. You've set that up, as well as having the option to go 6 with A259. And I think there's kind of enough safeties that my guess is that holds. I don't want to switch over to the solver yet, but I'm going to start putting in the cards because I'd like to be able to check quickly after. Should make sure the rules are right. Because this looks difficult. And this is the kind of position I think is just really easy to blow because often there's a bunch of ways to save it, but they all look identical to the ways to lose it, right? It's a lot of moves that look very similar, and you have to navigate which of these uncomfortable looking options work. And again, often a bunch of the options work, but that doesn't mean it's all that easy to play. The kind of uncomfortable, all moves look vaguely plausible is, in my opinion, the kind of most likely positions for someone to blow. It seems like I've received a message on Discord, so I'm going to go check that. But my best guess is 5, 4, 7, 6, and 5. And, or that's my instinct here. And that is a move Tezuka historically has some comfort playing, right? That is a move type he has, as I've said this a number of times, Tezuka likes going in 5 more than most players do. All right, that message was not related to Ultimecia. Incidentally, I should say this is a 3-way finals, so this is the first matchup of the finals. Midas will then play both of these players. Whoever wins this matchup is obviously in pole position. Yeah, I I personally, I don't know if this is. There can be a problem where the loser of the first match doesn't have that much to play for in their second match, and I hope we see a serious fight in the second match. Whoever loses this, um, it didn't matter, but okay, 5, 4, 7, 6, and 5 is played. I thought this was the best try, and now I think I will bring up the solver because I'm curious if this holds or not. But what we're gonna learn is just whether this holds or doesn't. Right? We're not gonna learn if there's a win. I'm not gonna look at what the line is. So I really liked Seto's move in 9. I thought that was correct. Um, and looks like good pressure to me. So Tezuka had 4 moves that tie. Just 4. Actually, let's not check if this was one of them. Let's just note Tezuka had 4 ties. Now, some might say 4 ties is not very many, there's 20 losses. Others might say, but the only squares you can play in are 4 or 5. Some of the cards there were ridiculous, so that actually means most of the plausible moves you would check do hold. So if you're not analyzing the position, if you're, not really turning your brain on, and my brain's not quite on yet, if your brain's not quite on yet, and you're told there's 4 ties here, and 5, 4, 7, 6 was played in 5, well, that's one of the 2 squares where most of the ties are likely to be. You have 4 cards in hand, 8 cards. This was the lowest level card. That's the one most likely to be the card you want to play now if it can do something useful on board. I think based on that, you'd guess this holds. Like, odds are this is one of the holding moves. But of course, Triple Triad is a very specific game that we do not play by odds. So one move that came to mind for me here was 7, 5, 4, 6, and 3, setting up 1, 7, 8, 9 to have that combo in 2. The other kind of natural moves seem to me to be something like 7, 5, 4, 6, and 4. It seems less likely to me you'd start in 6, because 4 can lock in 7, but 6 only locks in 9, which you already have. So to me it looks like the natural squares are 4, 3. Maybe you can play for an L and 2, 7, 5, 4, 6, and 2 with the others 2 sweeping. But if you're looking to keep cards that sweep later, I still see that 4, 8, 7, 6 lining up so well against 7, 8, 6, 4. So I would be sort of trying to keep that coverage possible. Though maybe you just can't, right? Because maybe that just never plays. Also, something interesting to note that I hadn't noticed till now. Same wall is on, right? A259 has the same wall in 2. And that gives Tezuka some counterplay in some spots where there's some combo risk. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe the only time there's ever combo risk is when Seto plays in 3 and then 2. And in that case, Tezuka cannot combo back in 2. Alright, he's picked up for 876. I would guess this is headed for 4. Interesting he held on to 7546. Alright, it goes back down. Will Seto take over 2 minutes on this move? Viewers want to know. Actually, sorry, this is a 7-minute game, so he's already taken 4 minutes, not 2 minutes. Yeah, Seto playing very slowly by his standards, which is good. Like, you want to see it, right? This is a finals. So I think this game, Seto got some pressure, but I think Tezuka's move in 5 holds. I'm not seeing anything that breaks it. Now, I said a lot of times, I haven't said recently, but I've said a lot of times in the past, like, players do not survive that many pressures, right? A lot of the reason, I mean, the best players will survive spots that weaker players won't, sure. But you look at the record of even the best players, they get under serious pressure 2, 3 times, they're probably going to fold. And this seems to me like it qualifies as a first pressure of Tezuka. He went down to very little time. It seemed to me a sketchy, difficult position. Now, we don't want to commit to gambler's fallacy and go, okay, you've been under pressure twice, you are guaranteed to lose the third time you're under pressure. That's not how, 1 out of 2 or 1 out of 3 odds actually work. But it is to say, this seems dangerous, and players don't survive danger at that higher rates. Right? The reason the best players are the best is usually more that they avoid being in spots they're under serious pressure, rather than being that much better at surviving high pressure. Separating the best from the very good. Yeah. Now, I have been thinking, Seto is such a good calculator, right? And there have been some examples of this recently, but Seto might be the GOAT calculator. And that means there are just positions that he will save 100% of the time because it's just in calculation range and he will just get it right. And other very strong players just won't have the same calculation range. So those positions, they may get right, but there's a serious chance for mistake. And he just never makes mistakes there. And this will both save him some positions other people would lose some of the time that he will never lose. And this will also win him some positions that other players might miss the win. So even aside his general skill at the game, his ability to calculate just makes the margins smaller, right? It means he's going to be in less trouble in some positions than anyone else would be in, and he's going to have more of a chance to win in some positions than anyone else would have. All right, so I thought the two candidate moves here were a259 and 6 and 1987 in 1. 1987 in 1 seems more appealing because it's both safe and the card it grabs is safe. Now, first line I notice is that against 4876 and 2, if we go 1, we cannot play a259 and 6. We get comboed, but we can play the non-capturing 7864 and 6. And that is our one tie there. If they play 7546 and 2, we win. If they go in 3, they cannot set up to have double captures. So against either move in 3, we can go 2, and we at least hold. Okay. And against 6, we always have, against 4876 and 6. Against 4876 and 6, we can play 7864 and 2, because a259 actually gets plussed. And against 7546 and 6, we can play a259 and 2, and we hold. So 1 should be a hold. What about 6? Let's calculate it. I've been saying calculation practice is good, and I've been kind of lazy about calculating, but let's actually calculate these moves. a259, though actually in this position, after I determined 1 would be a tie, I would now be double checking 1, right? I would say I'm pretty sure 1987 and 1 tied, but I did sort of cheat a little, right? I didn't go into specifics on moves in 3. I'd be a little more careful there, right? I'd specifically say each card in 3, am I 100% sure I hold there? And I would conclude 1987 and 1 holds. At this point, I have no interest in moves that do not have potential to win. So I probably wouldn't check 6 anymore, because I don't think it can win. I don't have the sweepers. And there's a fair chance actually my cards side to side are getting swept. So I would actually kind of not put much focus on 6. I might check it for briefly, but I would not kind of give it full attention. I would instead start thinking, do I have 3? Is there something here that has potential to suddenly win? Now, I don't think 3 does anything, but that's the kind of thing I'd start jumping to, because we do have the tie in hand. And I think I would quickly conclude I don't think we have a winning shot here, right? This seems so unlikely to have a winning shot. So I think 1987 and 1 should be played, and I'm gonna go now see if if this game was played correctly on Mr. Solver. So after that move in 9, we said there were 4 ties. We're gonna stay behind the game. One of those ties was this move in 5. What squares were the other ties? There were 2 ties in 4, and they were 5476 and 1987. So I thought 1987 and 4876 in 1 was dangerous. There are 2 ties there. You do have to play 5. But 5476 and 5 does hold. Okay. Sorry, my voice is going. And I also thought 4876 was, yeah. So 5476 and 4, Seto has 4876 and 1, and there's only 1 tie, and it's in 3. That's really hard to find and almost impossible at distance. So those seemed very dangerous to me. Where else is there a tie? There's a tie in 3. 5476 and 3, when Tezuka went in 5, was also a tie. Or was a tie. Alright, that seems really hard to find. And what's our last tie? Was his move a tie? His move was a tie. Okay. So I think of those options, this was clearly the most practical choice and the best choice. So nicely done to Tezuka, and nicely done to Seto for forcing him to find it. In this position, turns out Seto only actually has 2 ties. I didn't check 6 carefully enough. I didn't think that would lose. I thought that would tie. Sure looks like he played one of them. And yeah, we'll stop there. He's picked up 1987. He does play it in 1. We can now check how many ties he had. 1. This was the only tying move. So actually, surprising amount of pressure back and forth. Because after Tezuka's move in 5, like, there wasn't risk that Seto, I think, wasn't going to play in 2. But he actually had to be really careful about what card he put in 2. I was assuming, like, 7546 and 2 was fine, but that actually lost. That lost to 1987 here. Because your 1789 has no up. You actually need the up power. Like, the end game here after 4876 and 2, where 7546 kind of dominates up down, actually is showing what kind of was needed. So, just more precision in both directions than I thought, which possibly means I should close the solver and be looking more carefully. I would have done the tie with 7864 and 7, but it's the same thing. Okay, 19871, 48762, 82593, 75466, 7864 remaining. I think both players can feel good about this game. Just on a correctness level, looks like nothing was wrong, but I also think basically maximal moves were chosen at each point. At least move 3 onwards. Like, I think Seto's move in 3 was the most pressure available. I think Tezuka's response was not only the most comfortable tie, but actually had some chances to sneak that game against a lesser opponent. And of the options in 2 and 4, I think 4 is the more appealing for Seto. So I think kind of from the move 3 through 6 portion of the game, this was just absolutely perfectly played. I'm not entirely sure about the move in 8, but I didn't find a clear plan of attack. My instinct against these weak corners is to play adjacent corners rather than to capture immediately, especially when it gives up safety like this did in 9. So my instinct would have been 1 or 9 myself. But it was awkwarder than I expected it to be. Yeah, 1, 2, 5, 7, and 7. A reasonable pressure starter. Notably, Tezuka has said, and this is not a spoiler or anything because, the games have all been played by the time this video is coming out, has said he's really been liking weak corner starters and the kind of awkwardness and pressure they create. And so I think the move Seto played is also the move Tezuka would have played were he the one who had first turn. Alright, I'm going to pause and we'll come back when the second game starts. Maybe we'll make it a whole new video. Yeah, we'll make it a whole new video. So see you then. Really nice first game of the finals.